It's time for Speaking of Speaking. Quick tips and tools to take you from stage fright to spotlight. This podcast gives you an inside look from the world of public speaking and speaking secrets you need to be bold from the stage, no matter what business you're in. The host of Speaking, Carl Richards.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, it's another edition of Speaking of Speaking. I recently had the opportunity to attend an event for podcasters and guests where I met today's guest, and I'm so glad that we connected, and I think you will be as well. Before you appear on a podcast, give your next presentation or have a sales conversation, which could pretty much be all of you. You might want to talk to Monique McDonald. Now, Monique is an award-winning, Grammy-nominated vocal specialist and certified conscious transformational coach. Initially, though, she was terrified to audition or speak publicly. And maybe you can relate to that. I know I can for sure. Monique studied intensely with excellent coaches to cultivate her confidence, number one. And as a result, she's celebrated with outstanding opera and masterclass performances throughout Europe, Russia, Japan, and the US, including Carnegie Hall, New York City, and the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. She's known as the Magnetic Voice Mentor, and Monique's passion is to empower speakers, including you, to find their authentic voice and vibrate the world. Monique, welcome to Speaking of Speaking.
Oh, Carl, thank you so much for having me. It's so exciting to be here with you today and all your listeners.
I am honored to have you on today, and I'm excited to hear your message about, really how do you unleash your authentic voice? But I want to go back a couple of years and maybe even a couple more years on top of that to back in the day when you were nervous, or shall we say terrified, to speak publicly or audition. What was going on in your life at the time, and how was that impacting you?
Oh, really good question. Well, I was an aspiring opera singer, and I was going to every audition I could in New York City, and I would be amazing. Put me in front of 1,000 people and do a concert. I rock it. Put me in a room with 3 people looking at me with judgment and criticism, at least in my mind.
Right.
And I would flush myself down the toilet every time. And I would go out there and I would walk out and I would start thinking to myself, oh my God, is my dress too tight? What do they think of? I was having this self-talk that was just literally choking me. I would never sing well for audition, and I never got hired through audition, but I got hired through people hearing me sing in public, right? So I felt the need to really crack this code that I thought that, auditioning, and what were the 3 things that were really holding me back. And what I did was I went to a great coach, and it was called the Audition Project. I'll never forget it. And you auditioned every week for 6 weeks for really important VIPs, and you got to hear their feedback. So one of the things that I learned was that they can't wait for you to be fantastic, right? That had never occurred to me.
Oh,
right. I was walking out with all this, they're going to hate me because I'm not good enough, which is, as you know, Carl, it's something that most people who have the nerve to stand up in front of people and speak or sing has on some level to negotiate, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
That idea of I'm not good enough, or the imposter syndrome of who the hell am I to be doing this?
Right.
So that was something that really helped me reframe that in my mind, if you know what I mean, right?
Yep.
What if I'm walking out and I think to myself, wow, they can't wait for me to be fabulous, right? That really switched up the way I felt about myself, the way I walked out on the stage, or, that was it. The second thing I found out was this is something that, just like everything else I had to learn about being an opera singer, took practice. The more you did it, the easier it got. And this is something that I love to talk to my clients about, because it's something that as a singer, I was always asked. So do you still get nervous, right? I've been on the stage for 20 years now, plus probably. And here's the truth that nobody tells you. The nerves don't go away. right? They
Absolutely
don't
not.
go away. You learn how to negotiate them. You learn how to make them your friend and redirect that energy so that you can use it to empower you, right?
Yeah.
So I always
For
say,
sure.
that little tickle in your tummy that we call fear or anxiety is just a tickle in your tummy
Mhm.
that we are interpreting as fear or anxiety. We get the same tickle in our tummy when we're excited.
Isn't that wild? One of the best examples of that I can think of too was I remember watching, I think it was a biography for Johnny Carson.
Mm.
And Carson, people would see him publicly on the stage, The Tonight Show, all the time. And you would think, here's a guy put together, very confident. But what you didn't see was the tummy tickling going on in him. And this is what they explained in the biography was that he, I guess, was a nervous wreck every
Right.
time before he would walk out on stage and would smoke, I don't know how many cigarettes before he had to go out on stage and take a shot of whatever or coffee or whatever to make sure that when he did walk out on stage, he was ready. But you're right. Those moments, that anxiety, it doesn't go away.
No, it doesn't.
I still have that anxiety. I'm assuming you still have that
I still
anxiety
do.
too. And I think that's one of the misnomers when people see somebody just killing it on the stage.
That's
You
right.
think, oh, they're so good, but you don't know what mental exercises they had to go through, firstly, to get them to that stage in the first place, but also that they had to go through just to get out on that particular stage in that moment.
That's
you don't
right.
see that part. It's like the iceberg. You only see the top. You don't see all of the
Yes.
crystallized formation underneath it. So I'm glad you brought that up because that's a huge misnomer, I think, with a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think, that's part of what I do as a conscious transformation coach is help people with these. First of all, I like to call it when we go through life, we have these experiences that some interpret as trauma, some interpret as rejection, whatever it is. And they leave what I call emotional debris in our consciousness. And whenever these kinds of things happen, what we do is we check out of our body in order to survive it, right? And that's what I see happening with a lot of speakers, right? When they get up to speak, when they're dealing with the nerves and they're feeling what they're feeling, they jump right out of their body into their minds and they become this talking head and they're spewing out their content and we've lost them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I help my speakers do is finally release all of that old tape, that old emotional debris that shows up as limiting beliefs, right? And all that stuff they've been carrying around. I see it as like they've been carrying around these duffel bags, all their lives. And so we want to release it so that when you arrive at the moment, and the two moments I find, and you tell me if you agree with me, Carl, the two moments I find that are the most difficult in a presentation or your keynote speech is the first moment. So when you first enter, like walking in, and your call to action.
100%. And just to back this up, if there's one thing, well, two things that I will share with speakers as well when we've worked together is I'll say the two most important parts of your talk are your introduction and your conclusion.
Yes.
That's not to say the rest of the presentation isn't important, but if you can nail your intro and hit home your conclusion with a proper call to action, all of those things, the presentation, I don't want to say it's less relevant, but if you establish that credibility,
that's right,
that authenticity off the beginning,
yes,
and then remind people of it as you're getting ready to exit stage left or stage right, depending on which part of the stage you're leaving from, then you've nailed it. Even if they only have one thing that they take away from your presentation that you've maybe been delivering for 15, 20 minutes, an hour maybe.
That's right.
They only remember one thing. Make sure it's somewhere in the conclusion and make sure you nail it in the beginning because those are the two most important parts. Spot on with that.
Yeah. And it tends to be when we check out the most. Right? Because we're so nervous, right? When we're walking on stage, that rush of nerves, right? We've been talking about this now, that lack of confidence, that feeling. And I call it in my course, it's the first class that I teach, to prepare to be seen and heard.
Oh, I love it.
right? As, speaker training and getting ready to share your content, you're working on everything but
Yep.
that, like, how do you get ready to be seen and heard? We all say we want that, but our conditioning and our life experiences have often taught us that, I call it biology. It's
Right.
dangerous, right? When we are herd mentality human beings, we feel safest in the crowd. So to stand up apart and in front of the crowd, our bodies freak out. Get me out of here. It's not safe. It's not safe, right? And we have to deal with that on some level. And every body is different based on our life experiences. So I really work with clients to find out what their specific needs are in order to prepare themselves to be seen and heard, so that they've been practicing these rituals, or, everybody who has been successful. You talk to athletes, you talk to actors, you talk to anybody who has made it being seen and heard. They have their own little rituals that they go through in order to walk into that room or that arena.
And in some cases, if I could just jump in here and say, in some cases, it's not all vocal exercises, or it's not all just making noises with your mouth or anything like that. I have known broadcasters, for example, and yes, even broadcasters do it, who will do jumping jacks before they go on the air. And sometimes between each set of talk breaks, they'll do some kind of physical warm up to keep them, or some type of physical movement or whatever, to keep them in the zone so that their energy is where they want it to be. And I've known speakers who travel and speak around the world who have similar practices, where whether it be a workout, whether it be some type of, maybe they go for a run in the morning, maybe they do have a meditation session, whatever it is for them, it's getting in the zone, not only mentally preparing, but also, I think, and you tell me what you think about this too, that there's a certain amount of physical preparation that needs to be done too, which also helps the mental.
Absolutely. I spoke a little bit earlier about how one of the ways that we check out of the moment is we jump up out of our bodies into our mind. And the physical movement, or, Tony Robbins talks about find your gesture of power, right? That makes you feel powerful, or the superhero pose, which is something I really love to give Carl just did it, by the way.
Which in an audio podcast doesn't come across very well, but picture, like you say, Aquaman, Superman, Batman, any of them, Wonder Woman, that, hands on the hips, kind of
right,
the most confident, shoulders back, the most confident pose you could picture.
That's right. And breathe and know yourself in that moment. So yes, absolutely, Carl. So the game is mentally and whatever quiets your mind. I think that's one of the things that makes us the most nervous, is the fear of forgetting what all our content is and not having anything to say, or leaving something out, or, being boring, or whatever the thought is.
Right.
The idea is to quiet the mind and trust yourself, because you're an expert. You've done your homework, and this is the time to let go and trust that it's going to come out. Is it going to come out perfectly? Folks, I'm here to tell you the big secret of public speaking. It never comes out the way you want it to.
And here's the thing, you're musically trained. You know that the basis of perfection in music is a lot of imperfection.
That's right.
Here's a musical lesson for you, kids. If you take two notes that should never be side by side and put them together,
all of a sudden that's jazz.
It will sound absolutely horrible. But if you add a third note to that, now all of a sudden that imperfection becomes perfect. So even though it might seem seamless as a person is speaking and presenting, it's not. And the only person who knows it's not perfect is probably the speaker.
That's right.
Right.
Unless speaker loses themselves,
right,
and just gives up. So to be seen and heard, the most important aspects that you want to hit in order to practice to be ready to be seen and heard are something physical, that brings you into your body.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Something that calms the mind and reminds you that you are safe. And you find out what that is for you. For some people, it's meditation. For some people, it's affirmations. For some people, it's running the whole show in their mind and seeing it go as they want it to, right? Whatever mental exercises that you need in order to help you feel safe. And then actual vocally getting your tongue moving, getting your la, 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 warming your voice up so that you are speaking with all of you. And these three things of getting ready to be seen and heard is the first step to unleashing your authentic voice, your authentic you, because practicing that means that you show up fully in every area, in all of your magnificence. So when you make a mistake or say the wrong thing, people are going to love you for it because you're not trying to be perfect, right?
Yeah, 100%. I've had input from coaches where they say part of it is about silencing that, let's call it the itty bitty shitty committee. That's telling you can't do this, you shouldn't be doing this. And by the way, you're going to make mistakes. But then also when you're in that moment, knowing that mistakes are going to happen. And I like to put it in the sense of, I have two little nuggets I share with people all the time when I'm training them, or whether it be speaking, whether it be a podcast, whatever it is. Number one thing is the only person in control of your speaking is you. I learned that in speech therapy years ago. That's number one. Number two is the audience doesn't know what you don't tell them.
That's right. Oh, that's my favorite. That's
right?
One of my favorites.
Unless your audience is sitting there with a script, right? So if you're in theater and it has to go in a certain order, because if it doesn't, a Shakespearean play doesn't look like a Shakespearean play if all of a sudden something from musical theater pops in, right? So it needs to be in a specific order. But in most cases, the audience doesn't have the luxury of having the script in front of them. So a keynoter can make numerous mistakes. It's does the audience notice them? And if the audience does notice them, or if it's a really big gaffe, that it's okay to take a moment and acknowledge that. And you know what? The audience will probably laugh. They'll relax knowing that, oh my goodness, you're not perfect. You just made a mistake. That makes me feel good about you. I like you. I think I'm going to sign up for your program because now I have built a know, like, and trust factor with you because you've just been authentic.
And that's it. That's the key. And the other piece of that, I love what you said, Carl, every single word. And the other piece of that is when I'm sitting in the audience and I see someone do a flawless talk or a flawless performance, you kind of marvel at, wow, that was perfect.
Yep.
But you don't feel much. And you certainly can't identify with it, right? But when you see the speaker, giving with all of their heart, fully engaged, totally and authentically themselves, whatever that looks like, all of a sudden you think to yourself, wow, you mean I can just be me and that's enough when I do my talk, right? We're silently giving our potential clients permission to be their authentic selves.
100%. And I've been on both sides of the spectrum where I'm 100% rehearsed and my speeches or my talks are delivered word for word, scripted. It's almost like a dramatization as opposed to a talk. And then I've also walked out on stage where I know where I'm going. I know point A, I know point B. And I'll be 100% honest with you and say, I get better results and I feel better about what I just shared with my audience when I'm not handcuffed to my script, that I can allow myself to go with the flow. It also allows me to now interact better with my audience, because if the audience says something, now I can jump in and I can react to that.
As a real person.
And still stay on track in my presentation. And by the way, this doesn't happen overnight. So if you're listening here today and listening to Monique and I share this information with you. And by the way, Monique, this has been phenomenal information. Thank you so much for sharing it.
I'm so happy.
If you're listening to this and it's the first time you're hearing this, you're going, I can't do that. You know what? You're probably going to have to start out by writing a lot of things out word for word and memorizing so you internalize your messaging. But then once you do that a few times, and I say this as a trick or a technique because when I started out as a broadcaster, I had to write out everything word for word. I had to write out the radio station call signals, the song title, the artist, the time, my name, everything I was going to say in that 1 to 2 minutes. I had to write it all out the more I did it, the easier it was to just pick up a piece of paper that had a couple of notes on it about what I was going to talk about and then talk around it, because I've now trained myself to do that.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. I absolutely agree, because two things that I want to bring up around what we've been discussing. It doesn't mean that you don't need to have a talk written out and practice it, right?
You might want to do that.
You must do that. However, there is a very big distinction between the written word and the spoken word. And this is something that a lot of people, again, they don't talk about this. When we are reading a script, 9 times out of 10, our voice becomes monotone, right?
Yes.
So what I suggest to my clients is write out your talk word for word and get it just like you want it and live with it for a long time, but don't memorize it, is what I say, right? Know it. But don't memorize, because a lot of us, when we are doing the memorization, all we're doing is then reading it in our mind, which again does the monotone to the voice, right? So as you said, once you get more and more familiar with the talk you want to give and the exact wording, and one of my business coaches would talk about not memorizing the words or the content, but to memorize the structure. Like, here is my story. Here is my teaching points. Here is my call to action, and memorize the structure. What is coming next? Because this is what's true. You know your stuff. You know it. So what I do is I put bullet points down or notes that will remind me, oh, this is the story and the few points that I want to make sure that I hit in the story. And then, like a good jazz player, I riff. Because I know the stuff, and you do too. You know your stuff, and to trust it, because a lot of times, if we have the courage to do that, it comes out better than we wrote it. And I call that leaving room for the divine, right? Leaving room for the universe to speak through you. If your mind is concerned with the memorization of it, if somebody from the audience laughs or, coughs or says something out, it's like you're so disturbed, you lose your place and you have to start over. When you're riffing, staying in your body, fully engaged, if somebody says something, you're not thrown off your game as much. Right, Carl?
100%. I think it takes and I'm going to go on a limb here and say this, it takes a very skilled and disciplined speaker to be able to memorize a talk and make it sound authentic.
I agree.
And it's not always going to work, because you will, like you just said, Monique, you will slip into dialogue mode, even if you're not trying. Maybe you didn't sleep well the night before because you're in a hotel. It's not your own bed, forgot your pillow or your teddy bear, whatever it is. And I know you're laughing at me for saying teddy bear. Yes. I have one.
I do. But anyways, too.
You forgot that. You didn't sleep well. You're in memorization mode. Who's to say that it's not going to just sound like regular dialogue, a regular monotone monologue type delivery, as opposed to, like you said, I have my bullet points, I know where I'm going, and I'm going to trust that I'm going to get there. So it takes a very disciplined person. And I would almost say 99.3876% of the time, which is almost all of it, it's not going to work. Yeah. It might work for practice for, like you said, not memorizing, but getting comfortable, getting familiar with your messaging be able to be. But because again, it's not about here's my message. Anyone can write a speech, memorize it, and deliver it. Anybody. There are tips, there are tricks, there are techniques for memorization. Actors do it all the time.
Right.
All the time. Theater performers.
Opera singers have to do it in another language.
Yeah, there you go. So musicians do it all the time. But what the difference is, and let's just talk about spoken word here for a moment. If it's spoken word, anyone can do it. What separates somebody that can just write, rehearse, and memorize? What's the difference? If that's all you're doing and then delivering it seamless every single time, what's missing? Exactly everything Monique and I are talking about right here.
Right. What's missing is
you, the authenticity piece, which, and I know we hear that word thrown around a lot. We have for the last 4 or 5 years, but it's so true that people want you. Because here's the thing. If you're just going to memorize your speech and deliver it word for word, you know what? Send me the speech.
Exactly. Send me the recording.
Save the plane ticket. Give me the transcript. I'll read it. And if I like it, I might sign up for something. As opposed to, you know what? I can't wait to hear Monique speak because, man, did she ever connect? You're probably not saying that, but really that's what your subconscious mind is saying. She's connecting with me. She really is when she speaks because she knows how to get into that space where she's so authentic that she has the audience in the palm of her hand.
Yes. So thank you for that, because you reminded me of one of my favorite quotes from the 16th century philosopher and poet Rumi. And the quote is, "There is a voice that doesn't use words. Listen," right?
I love it.
Because what people almost always say to me and my clients, by the way, is, "I love your energy," right? Because, and this is what I call presence or stage presence or charisma, right? People throw these words around all the time. What is it really? What it really is that you are so connected within yourself, to yourself, that you're fully present when you're with another. You're not thinking about, what am I going to say next? Right? Yep. Just like we are now having this flow between us, an energetic flow that is happening, yes, with words, but it's happening because we are energetically connected, right? And that is one of my secrets, right? How to connect to yourself in such a way that your energy is flowing, even if you don't say a word. And that brings me to one of my biggest messages. And I've gotten a lot of flack for it, Carl. I bet you can imagine. I'm going to share it with you, and you can imagine what some people might have said.
Yep.
My voice vibrates the world. So, some people might take it the wrong way, but think about this.
Yep.
When our voice is spoken, I believe our voice is like our thumbprint. Your voice is uniquely yours, right? And it is a combination of all of your life experiences, as well as your biology and the way your cheekbones and your face and your, all of the things, all of the millions of things that come together to connect and create the sound that is your distinct voice. And every time we speak, the sound comes out of us in waves. Sound waves. And whether you're singing or speaking, those waves come out and literally vibrate the air around us, vibrate our own bodies, as well as the bodies of the listeners. And when you are speaking with this intention and understanding, my voice vibrates the world, you're going to speak in a different way.
I can understand why you've gotten pushback from that. But I love it. It's not ending up on the cutting room floor, by the way.
Oh, good. Glad to hear that.
It will be in the final recording, which, of course, everybody is now hearing. But that's a very powerful message. And I think what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to leave it there, because we could talk about this for another 6 hours.
I see that, Carl. We have so much in common. And I think I might have to invite you onto my podcast. Wouldn't that be fun?
Oh, my goodness.
The Magnetic Voice podcast. Yes, you're going to be a guest on the Magnetic Voice podcast. I can't wait.
I would love to be on your show. And by the way, just food for thought for you. And also, if you're listening to this, then this is also, put this in the back of your mind. We're about to launch, by the way, this is the end of October when we're recording this in 2022. We're about to launch another podcast that's all about podcasting. There are so many podcasts out there in the world, but there are so many that are not about podcasting. So there are a few out there. We have a mutual colleague, Michelle Abraham, who has a podcast that's about podcasting. There are a few others, but there are a lot of podcasts out there that don't talk about the art or the skill or the things you need to have a successful podcast. So I'm starting one, and it'll be launching very soon. And Monique, I would like you to come back to be a guest on that podcast.
I would be honored to, because we're having way so much fun.
Who said podcasting can't be fun? Of course it can.
That's right.
Oh, it has been a phenomenal conversation. Before I let you go, though, I want to give you the opportunity to share something with the audience. If you have a takeaway that they should look at or whatever it is that you'd like to offer them.
There are two things. First of all, I have my signature course, which I love, which we talked about, Prepare to be Seen and Heard. That's the first module of my course. And it's called Unleash Your Authentic Voice. Yay!
Oh, who knew that would be the name of it?
And I have one coming up in a few weeks, and I do it 3 or 4 times a year. So this is something that I will always be doing it because it changes lives and I love teaching it. And you can go to my website, themagneticvoice.com, and find out all about it. But I have a special gift for your listeners today, Carl.
Oh, okay.
One of the reasons why I decided to add a speaking track to my studio, I was working only with singers for quite some time, but I decided to add a speaking track to my studio because I was watching Tony Robbins' documentary, I'm Not Your Guru.
Great documentary, by the way.
It was life-changing. My life changed that day, in fact. Because of watching that. And it occurred to me, he was having trouble with his voice. And he was going through a time when that was created where he could only be on stage for an hour or so because his voice was in such distress. It occurred to me, what if I could get to the next Tony Robbins or the next person with a big message and teach them how to take care of their instrument, how to speak according to the laws of nature so that they can speak forever. So I have put together my 5 secrets of the diva. These are the ways I took care of my voice when I was on tour touring. And I have that as a free gift for your audience and for you, Carl, because I really believe that your voice is your most valuable sales tool. So you can go to themagneticvoice.com/voice and get your free gift.
And all those links, by the way, that Monique just shared, they will be in the show notes. You'll be able to just go there, click on the link. Her bio's there as well. Make sure you go to her website anyways. There's a lot of other things you'll be able to find out about Monique. Oh, Monique McDonald, I don't want to let you go.
I feel the same. This has just been wonderful. And I love what you do, Carl. You are helping so many people. And, you know, as Kimberly Crow says, when you offer people a stage, you get stars in your crown in heaven, apparently.
There you go. I love it. Monique McDonald, your magnetic voice mentor, who I don't want to let go. But before I do, begrudgingly, I'm going to let you have the final thought.
So, my dear friends, remember that we are living in a world that needs strong, authentic voices more than ever. Please speak your truth, follow your heart, be authentic, and remember, your voice vibrates the world.
God, do I have to let you go? Monique McDonald, it has been phenomenal. Thank you so much. That's a great place to leave it. And I really appreciate you taking the time today to be on Speaking of Speaking.
Thank you for having me, Carl. It's really been a blast.
And remember, get out there and own the platform.
Thanks for listening to the Speaking of Speaking podcast. Fired up about something you heard today? Want to learn more? Be sure to visit carlspeaks.ca. And don't forget to follow Carl on Twitter @CarlRichard72 or join the Facebook group Speaking of Speaking.